Welcome back to another edition, and I'm delighted to have Kristine Anthes uh, with us today, who is a PhD, a doctor of psychology. Is that right, Kristine?
It is.
And she is also IFS therapist, trained in IFS. And what I think really makes her unique is she has a huge interest in applying IFS, money, and to dating.
That's right.
So, and I was just telling Christine we're working on a white paper regarding this because I don't think there's anything written on that combination. And how when I tell people I'm working on that, that it's kind of some eyes get raised like, do what? Um, how did you get involved into being a IFS matchmaker of sorts?
That's a great question. And thanks, Rick, just for the episode. So as you said, I'm IFS level 3 trained. I'm also IFIO trained, the couples therapy version. And when I sit with couples who are in deep pain and I help them notice the parts who are stuck in that pain, and then they can build relationships with those parts inside so they have a better relationship outside with their beloved. One thing that I've often wondered is how can I prevent the pain so that it doesn't come to this?
Mm.
And one day I was sitting with a couple and I noticed, oh, I've actually matched some of my friends in the past who are in long-term relationships. Maybe to prevent the pain, I can help people create initial relationships on better compatibility. Because sometimes when I'm sitting with those couples in such deep pain and helping them with that, holding that, I've also wondered maybe they weren't compatible to begin with emotionally and perhaps even financially, because that does come up in the ruptures and the things that need to be repaired in couples therapy.
Yeah, so I think it's quite unique. I mean, I love that thought process of let's go to the very foundation of this relationship and could have there been anything done there that would have prevented it. And I would guess in greater understanding of the two partners, or of saying, "Wow, we aren't we aren't really a great long-term fit."
Mhm.
I think that's pretty cutting edge and revolutionary in itself. Um, and I've heard of like premarital counseling,
Sure, right.
uh, typically done that that I know of in the frame of a church or a pastor that might do that. But I've never heard of anything really like this is my service. This is a service, an offering that one does. And now I think there's a lot of matchmakers, but I don't know that they're matchmakers with the IFS lens.
Right, right. Yeah, when I had that light bulb moment, I thought, oh, I think I want to become a matchmaker. And I immediately did the training. I got certified by the Matchmaking Institute. It's now called the Global Love Institute. And that's how my IFS dating and matchmaking agency was born.
The Global Love Institute.
Yeah, correct. It used to be called the Matchmaking Institute, and now they
Okay.
go by the Global Love
Oh,
Institute.
I didn't even know there was a certification in matchmaking.
Yeah.
Oh, that's great. So then you add some, now you're adding something different to that, and which is the financial component.
That's right. Hmm.
And to listeners, that's where I come in.
Exactly.
Just to connect the dots.
Right. That's
But
exactly where you come in.
what
I've
led you to that?
Great question. So the compatibility is defined by a couple of different forms of compatibility. There's emotional, there's financial, there's intellectual, there's spiritual, and then there's physical. For a lot of people, not everyone, but for majority of folks, they often think of compatibility as chemistry or a spark, and that's usually based
Mhm.
on the physical attraction early on. And we know that that tends to fade. It maybe creates a liminal time after their first date where they feel like they're in love. And we know that that liminality typically fades by about 3 months. And then they start to really see more of the person and maybe more of the person's parts. And then if they're not already, emotionally compatible, financially compatible, which are the first two components. And that's the answer to your question. My focus on emotional and financial compatibility. Or there's no, say, like intellectual compatibility, and that's important to one or both of them, then the relationship may not survive.
Yeah, that
And
makes. Go ahead.
it I think that when we said earlier that when couples come to us and we or they maybe have the realization that they're maybe not compatible after all, that's hard to hear. At the same time,
Mhm.
I'm curious if maybe, I don't think it's true in all cases, but I think some couples may be compatible if they're more in relationship with the parts. And the parts, not just the protectors, but their exiles who hold limiting beliefs. These I'm not good enough. I'm too much. I'm unlovable. I need to earn love. And some of those limiting beliefs for me fall into the money scripts. Does that answer your question about you?
Totally.
Yeah.
Because in IFS, they're referred to as burdens, which are beliefs, which can become extreme beliefs that a
Mhm.
protector and an exile can carry
Mhm.
that may have worked perfectly, um, and especially when we were younger. But the beliefs don't change, the protectors don't change their job, and a person grows into adulthood with these extreme beliefs that worked well once and no longer work.
Right. And you probably see this too from, excuse me, my perspective. I think the protectors go more extreme over time. If they're originally based on attachment wounds or trauma, I think with outer relationships, they maybe grow more extreme if they haven't worked with their exiles. So, say like some of my clients come to me, and I can think of one example in particular, a man who was beyond generous in a past relationship because his exiles believed that they were unlovable, and love therefore has to be earned, and therefore he has to give away the store. After the relationship ends, he feels totally depleted, angry, understandable for sure. What he's not aware of is that the strategies his protectors are using are trying to stave off the unlovable. And and then when I introduce the idea that that's, like you said, a burden that an exile is carrying, and it's a false belief, then he can then maybe appreciate the protector, how hard it's working, and that it can't really solve. And that's not a failure of our protectors. No protector can actually heal an exile, only self can do that. Um, then that like long term opens up his relationship possibilities. And
Yes.
and one thing that I find can be really helpful with some clients is when they reach the point where they realize their protector is maybe protecting a part who feels unlovable, not good enough, and so on, is I'll often bring up an example. So, um, I'll say let's think about something for a moment. If we went to Yale New Haven Hospital's maternity ward for my clients who are here in person in my office, or clients who are virtual, I'll say, like, think of your local hospital, the maternity ward. Let's think of a newborn baby who's longing not just for milk, but to be held and to be rocked. The baby doesn't stop crying because they suddenly think, oh, I'm unlovable, I'm unworthy. I have to earn it. I have to please somebody to get my needs met. We know innately that our needs matter. Why else would a baby cry like that? It never occurs to them that they have to earn love, that they have to behave in a certain way. To me, along the line somewhere, the burden is created for an exile who learns otherwise, early in life in the family of origin or otherwise. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense.
That
So
usually catches clients.
when and so to this, you've noticed the financial
Mhm.
uh, problems that present. How do you address those, or well, what have you seen in that area?
How so?
Um, we know that they're problematic. We know that of the top five reasons people get divorced, finances touch several of them.
Mhm.
Um, what's normal in the matchmaking world in addressing financial?
In terms of how matchmakers traditionally address it?
Yeah,
Oh, um, there's a lot of things. One is that some matchmakers really focus on what the client or what that part of the client states is important. They want to be introduced somebody who is high net worth or has a certain career. Um, and then no shame in it, the matchmaker follows through with what the person wants. But as we know, and this is one of the ways in which money scripts are involved. The person with whom they're matched might have a money status manager, but they maybe have a money avoidant firefighter, and then the person who's dating them is not really dating them. They're dating a projection of what this person wants to display, financial capability, abundance, and so on. If those two people, not always, but I think often maybe, if those two people form a relationship, the person who wanted a provider and somehow maybe themselves has an exile who feels financially helpless. So they're kind of like, I was thinking about this the other day. They're kind of in a way outsourcing their self energy to the other person. I can't be confident. I can't be, capable, have ease, and so on. I need somebody who's a provider. They have an exile who maybe feels financially helpless. That money status manager may or may not be financially capable. They might have money avoidance firefighter who destroys whatever they earn, spends all that they earn, and then long term, the first person who went to the matchmaker wanting some kind of a provider, a certain net worth or a certain career or something, that wound of their own, financially helpless, doesn't get healed, and if anything, it gets exacerbated because it was the other person is not who they presented themselves to be. Does that make sense?
yes, and what I'm hearing you say is in I'll step back in a lot of couples money, um, dating couples, engaged couples, money isn't discussed
Right, right.
much at all.
Mhm.
With a matchmaker, it's something that's going to be discussed, but it sounds like it's more in like, what are you looking for?
Mhm.
Are you looking
Or
for
what are
someone
your
similar?
resources? Because the other person wants to know about your resources. That
Okay.
does come up and comes up a lot. Finances are discussed, resources are discussed, but in terms of a person's access, what do they have rather than values? We've talked before about how more contemporary matchmakers are bringing into their matchmaking a person's values, which is great. But we know from an IFS perspective that just because a person has a stated value, their parts may behave in a way that's inconsistent with those values. So I don't think asking about values enough. It's a great first step. Um, and then sorry, I lost my train of thought.
Yeah,
That, pardon?
what on the money, it sounds like the average matchmakers is going to be operating very much on the surface. This is what the client requested. So I'll try and match them with that. Versus what I hear you saying is, oh, that isn't necessarily going to mean it's a match because there's so much underlying
Right.
everything about it.
It might be a match for people who want to stay on the surface. And I respect that. But at the same time, sitting with couples in deep pain and helping them notice their parts, help their parts get unstuck, create a new, like more self-led dynamic with their partner. Originally this was like, I want to prevent that. So I don't I don't want to disregard that in matchmaking. It seems to me to be very important. It's not just different and unique that I wear a couples therapist hat and IFIO parts couples therapist hat. But to me, that brings more healing and more satisfying and more long-term connections.
So when someone engages you, I assume you have an intake process.
Mhm.
Is part of that asking them how much they make, how much their net worth is, some money questions?
Those kind of surface level questions, but I also have them, we've talked about this, I have them fill out the client's money script checklist, also the behavior checklist. And I ask them a lot about their relationship history because there's often, say, the client who's been so overly generous, who feels depleted and angry, who may now have flipped to a different protector of, from now on, the other person has to pay for everything. I'm not going to pay for anything. And that protector is going to also reduce the relationship opportunities. How have
So
they been burned financially is a big part of the intake.
when do you, as you're working with somebody on this, what I'm like, when do
Huh.
you match make them? When in the process do you say, okay, you're ready? Because I'm thinking, oh my God, this could take years of therapy to work through.
Yeah. Um, it can, and that brings up a couple of separate issues. So I have an IFS relational wealth blueprint service where we map the foundations of a person's internal family system. And we're mapping, what do those parts believe? How do they behave? When do they show up? What activates them, and so on. And when we get to the deep exiles, I refer them out to an IFS therapist, particularly if they don't live in Connecticut. Um, but just by noticing their parts can be transformative. Like, oh my
Mhm,
gosh.
mhm.
Hey, Christine, I had one session with you and I went to a dating app and I realized that my profile is really written by this extreme part who,
Wow, what an
yeah,
awareness.
yeah, who fears like financial exploitation or something, or a part who thinks I'm only compatible with a person who looks like this or something. Um, and to me, that's time limited. The goal there with the IFS relational wealth blueprint is not ongoing therapy. It's not therapy. The goal is to help a person become what I call relationship ready, that they're aware of their parts, They're aware of the part's unmet needs. They're aware of the part's values, and we talked about before. There's a consciousness of when those parts become activated, which ones become activated, and then helping them be more in relationship, practicing a U-turn before, say, their next date. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I'm thinking how proactive, or I think maybe doing a blueprint like this of a person's system is a little different than say a lot of IFS therapists work.
Well, in IFS therapy, we do map making.
Right.
My understanding of what some, not everybody does this, but I think what some people do for map making in IFS therapy is identifying the parts. I don't know that they go to, well, maybe they go to the limiting beliefs of these common burdens, unlovable, too much, not enough, and so on. I don't know that money scripts are in there. Um, but this is also not just time limited, that service. It's also really focused primarily on dating
Mm-hmm.
with a deep dive into their relationship history and how that's maybe brought them to how they're showing up right now with dating.
Yeah. I'm thinking how valuable it is to start to get a map of the system, of the relationship system.
Yeah.
And even though you're not necessarily doing the therapy in this process, identifying the protectors, the exiles, the firefighters. And to your point, then you can do you work with them if they live in your state on doing the exile work, or um, do you always send them out to do that work?
That hasn't happened yet. My blueprint clients are not in Connecticut. If that happens, I'll have to think about that. It might be a conflict of interest.
Okay. So most of your clients are virtual,
Right. Yeah.
out of state, and your licensing would prohibit you from doing therapy if you're
Right.
not licensed in that state. So you're identifying the issues for the person to go work on, which is very, very cool.
I think so too.
Yeah, I mean, what IFS probably therapists wouldn't like to get that referral of saying,
Right. Right.
"Hi, I'm here to work on my 2-year-old part."
Right, exactly. So what I'm doing with the blueprint service actually helps person maybe realize they need an IFS therapist, or if they have an IFS therapist, go a little deeper with these parts around dating and money. Um, and for IFS therapists who have clients who have those kind of parts, but they're not yet aware of them, they can help them map those. But I can do that too. And I can do it more specifically within this like relational wealth blueprint frame. And if the person wants to understand their parts and how they've shown up in their relationship history and how they want to, I think of it as like stop getting in their own way for future dating. And then if they want matchmaking, then things can be really different for them.
So I think I'm getting the view that if I'm an IFS therapist, I'm working with somebody, they're dating, a referral to you would
Mm.
make a lot of sense
Right.
in that you're not necessarily going to be doing the therapy. You're going to be working with the system, naming limiting beliefs, naming parts that are getting in the way,
Mhm.
maybe discovering some more exiles so that you can, in effect, collaborate
Mhm.
so, to that IFS therapist to continue work in a more focused way, perhaps, as it results to dating and relationships.
Yes, and I have found, and I know I'm biased, but I've found that that's vital because when a client comes to me exasperated because they've been overly generous and they feel depleted, and the realization that that's been based on this false belief that they're not good enough, they're not lovable, that can bring up enormous grief, not just in terms of finances lost, but emotional energy, opportunities to be with other people, and so on.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I want them to be able to experience that grief, not to have it flood them. As we know in IFS, we say like, give it to us drop by drop, not because the exile's pain is too much, but if they flood the person with the grief, then they flood self-energy. And then it's almost like they're reliving the trauma through the grief. If the exile gives it to a person's self-energy, they're in dialogue, which is the beginning of that corrective experience. They're not alone in it anymore.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's fascinating in being such a specific service informed by IFS, and now adding the financial component to that in a deeper way.
Yes, very much so. I'm chuckling because as you're saying that, and did I interrupt? You look like you
No, no,
there's a bit of an irony here. Just as our protectors have such good intent, but sometimes have this negative impact, they end up creating the very thing they fear. I've noticed a little bit of irony in people who are reaching out to me. For example, I have a woman who's reached out to me a couple of times about IFS matchmaking. She's heard about how transformative IFS can be. She thinks it's a really great idea to like notice her parts. She's worked with other matchmakers. She hasn't been satisfied with it and so on. So I haven't worked with her yet. And I've talked to her about the relational wealth blueprint, and she hasn't been interested. And each time we connect, she tells me she's almost ready to sign up for matchmaking. And then what she adds is that she needs to reach a certain milestone in her career in order to do that. So I don't know her. I haven't worked with her. And I respect that if she needs to wait for financial reasons or some other thing, career-wise and so on. Yet at the same time, I can't help but be curious if this is, say, a money worship part who keeps deferring meeting somebody because they think that money's going to solve their feelings of not enough or something. So the deep emotional work that could come through IFS therapy, specifically here in this context of dating and matchmaking, the map making and that emotional work, which would actually prepare her to be relationship ready for a person I might match her with, keeps getting deferred.
deferred by a protector, no doubt.
Right.
Let's pick this conversation up in another podcast.
Sounds great.
Where can people reach you if they want to reach out?
My website is IFS dating and matchmaking.com. IFS dating and matchmaking.com.
Great. Kristine, thank you so much for being with us, and we'll continue on another episode.
Wonderful. Thank you.